Welcome. Just hanging here while we get a few people on. Hopefully there'll be a few. I wanted to start doing more of these ketogenic. I'm just getting a lot of people asking me questions about it, and I thought I would just take the bull by the horns. Hey, Mr. T-Rod and Miss Pamela, welcome. Waiting to kind of build an audience here, and Mr. Tony and Mort. Glad that you're here with us on a Saturday too, nonetheless. I know Thomas probably ran about 15 miles this morning. Hi, Pamela. Hi, Sherry. Getting a little audience here. We'll get started once here in a little bit. I was just saying, so many people are reaching out to me because, recently I went low carb and I've had some tremendous success with it. Hi, Carla. And I thought instead of just answering everybody one-on-one, I would just take the bull by the horns and do these a live feed, maybe once a week or so. You can see, over here, it's just backwards. Right up there, it says low carb. That's my license plate I just recently got. Yeah, I saw T-Rod. I appreciate that. Hi, Terry. And we'll wait one more minute and I'll get going for all of you that joined on time. I don't want to waste your time on this call. And I don't know how long it'll go, but obviously you can bag out anytime you'd like and watch it later. Hi, Rachel. A lot of these people I have, I know personally, like Thomas. He's been just a good friend of mine. He's a middle school principal in South Texas and one of the best there is. He just loves kids and loves his teachers. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hi, Phyllis. As I roll through just a brief description of ketogenic low carb, type in your questions in the comment area and I'll answer them when we conclude here. Also, this Thursday evening, if you're here in Las Vegas in my home at 7 p.m., I'll be doing a kind of a health presentation that basically will go over some of the same stuff I'm doing here, but we'll have some samples of both some great carbohydrate type food and low carb desserts. Anyway, that's what I'll be delivering, and my famous low carb shake. I wished that someone who knew better would have got a hold of me earlier this year. Hi, Mr. Willie Johnson. And when I started to gain weight for the last 7-8 years, I was doing Ironman triathlons. I could keep my weight off. Hi, Steve. Steve Bentley is on, and Diana. Steve was my former triathlon coach. And anyway, during those last few years, I started to gain weight, and I was training like a gangbuster. Even when I had the fortunate opportunity to race the Ironman World Championship in Kona, Hawaii, and I lived over there for 2 months, I was gaining weight over there. I raced at 198 pounds, heaviest I've ever been. And then in 2016, I took that year off, still watching what I eat. I'm like a food nerd, and I gained 10 pounds that year. Even though I was strength training, it wasn't muscle, it was just around my waist. And so this year I started diets didn't work anymore. So it led me down a different path, and that path determined this question. And if you're going to have any sort of luck with a diet and you want to predict it before you start, you have to answer this one question first. And from the answer to this question, you could branch off into which kind of diet would work. Because if you think about it, all diets generally are trying to improve our health. We want to get our body composition. That usually means we're going to lose weight. We want to gain muscle. And so to be successful at a diet, what burns fat? What's the gatekeeper to fat? It's carbohydrate. And if someone would have told me that before I get into this question that I'll ask, I would have not quite understood it. And the question you have to ask is, are you insulin resistant or insulin sensitive? Because the gatekeeper there again to burning fat is carbohydrates because of insulin. What the role of insulin plays, and I just want to spend a little talking about that. If my insulin, obviously, when someone asked me about that before I understood it, I'd say, isn't that have something to do with diabetics, or it has something to do with blood sugar? And I've asked a lot of people that, and they don't quite understand it, but I'm going to give you a simple definition of insulin. And this is a muscle. And so if our bodies are, working at muscle, it needs fuel. I won't get into the science of that, although I could explain it to you. And when we ingest a carbohydrate, it creates glucose in our blood. That's commonly referred to as blood sugar. And every time you get blood sugar throughout your in your blood, glucose in your blood, insulin is released. And here's the role of insulin. So here's a muscle cell. And this is glucose, this finger, and all of a sudden the pancreas, because glucose is present, has to release an insulin. And if everything is working right, what insulin does as it's flowing past this working cell, that insulin acts as like a key, and it unlocks the insulin or the glucose receptor so the glucose can flow in that cell. That's what insulin does. And if it's working properly, you don't need a whole lot of insulin because every cell receipts the glucose as a key. If you become insulin resistant, that means that this cell is resistant to insulin. So the glucose floating around with insulin, and the cell goes, nope, I don't want you, and it passes. Nope, I don't want you, and it passes. And so now this muscle that needs glucose, it's turning its nose at insulin. Scientists to this day has no answer as to why that happens. It's over time, like in a type 2 diabetic, because there's a lot of insulin floating around that needs to get in this cell. The body, instead of releasing an example, I just showed one insulin, it might release 2 or 3 insulin. So you get this massive spike in insulin and highly resistant. So even if there's 3 insulin floating around and 1 glucose, nope, I don't want you. And the body, what happens to that excess glucose? Excess meaning the insulin, the cell turned its nose at insulin, so you got all this extra glucose in the blood. It's stored as fat. And that's why you'll see almost every type 2 diabetic or someone with metabolic syndrome or someone with insulin resistant, they gain weight. Just for that reason, because this cell is turning its nose at insulin. So the real question that you have to ask is, how do we manage insulin? Well, first of all, me and everybody else that I've talked to subscribes to the following theory about weight loss. I mean, I've been in the weight loss business for a long time, and I subscribe to this theory. Unfortunately, I was totally dead wrong, and that theory is eat less, move more. In other words, if I am, working out and burning more calories than I'm putting in, I should lose weight. Wrong. If you're insulin resistant, that didn't happen. In December last year, I did 2 60-hour fast in December. I restricted calories. I was counting like a hawk. I should have lost about 10 or 12 pounds based on this idea that if I consume less calories than I was burning, I should lose weight. I should have lost 10 or 11 pounds. I lost 1 pound. So here's the deal. If you go to my blog on livefreeanddreambig.com, the last blog post, I describe this and I'm in detail. And this whole thing about calorie in, calorie out is not correct. Did you know that 93% of those on The Biggest Loser, 93% gained all their weight back? And the diet used on The Biggest Loser is this eat less, move more theory. It's the third most popular diet in America. But there's not just one single compartment of calories. In other words, I thought all the calories went in, and if I ate less than I'm burning, I'm going to be burning fat. There's two storage compartments of calories in the body. And let me give you an analogy of that. The two storages, if you have a refrigerator and a freezer in your home, like we do, and 90% of the time or more, we're into that refrigerator, getting our food out, and occasionally we buy, more, and we store it in the freezer. And so rarely do we go in the freezer to get food. It's there for like a rainy day. I mean, I know that's what's in our freezer. I mean, that's kind of some food storage area in case the refrigerator gets empty for whatever reason. And that is the two storage compartments that we have in our body. And the refrigerator would be called glycogen, and the freezer would be fat. So what's glycogen? Glycogen is glucose that's stored in our body, anywhere from 400 to 500 grams, primarily in our liver. And so you have anywhere generally between 1,600 and 2,000 calories. And so on The Biggest Loser, where they're working out like crazy, they're getting into the glycogen stores. But afterwards, and so they burn up all that glycogen in that way, 6 hours a day in exercise. So the glycogen goes away. They have to burn fat. Then they put more food in their body, glucose, carbohydrate, spikes insulin, can't get access. And so when the body is in that massive deficit state where you're constantly trying to go into the refrigerator and you want to get it empty so you get into the freezer and get into that fat, your metabolism it slows way down. And that's why after this Biggest Loser, where they're working out like crazy. And how many of you have ever went on a diet that you subscribe to this one compartment theory? If I just eat less and move more, I'll lose weight. And most people do on a diet. And then right afterwards, you feel like crap. You are so hungry, and that's because your body's metabolism just slowed way down. And to feel good, you just shove some more calories in your body, and boom, you gain all your weight back. So the real question is, how do we manage insulin? How do we lower insulin? Because when insulin lowers in the blood, you can get access to fat. And anybody want to type in any questions here? And so when I discovered I was insulin resistant, and that's why I kept gaining weight. So I was shoving all this carbohydrate in my body. That's what all the endurance people say to do. I've actually, over my triathlon career, I've had 3 nutrition coaches because I had bonked in Ironmans where my brain said, dude, you're over. And I just had to stop going hard to go. And the nutrition people said, well, you must have did something wrong. That didn't set well to me. I did everything they told me. One nutrition person goes, I don't know what happened. I don't know why you bonked. And here's why I bonked. I'm shoving all this carbohydrate in my body, and here's that, working muscle, and oh, no, I don't want you. So all that carbohydrate wasn't going anywhere except to fat, which wasn't burning because I had raised insulin levels. So after I used up all of my food in the refrigerator, and because insulin levels were high, my brain, which was being fed glucose, said, time out, you got to slow way down because I got to preserve fuel. And that brain is what controls your diet. Seriously. everybody that's on this carbohydrate rich diet, 99% of America, you look at 1/2 of every adult in America is insulin resistant. And it's not like one day you are or not, one day you are. You have varying levels of insulin resistance. See, mine started, and over time it got worse. That's why I kept gaining weight. So in these races, I burned up everything in the refrigerator. In other words, I burned up all my glycogen because I wasn't burning fat like all these coaches said I would burn. My brain said, dude, stop. Boom. Had to go way easy. I bonked on the bike a couple of times. I bonked on the marathon a bunch of times. And so we have to manage insulin. So if you ask that question, am I insulin resistant? If you go to my webpage, livefreeanddreambig.com, on the main page, if you just scroll down a bit, there's an article linking how you determine if you're insulin resistant. But if you're starting to get older and you're starting to gain weight, even eating, diets don't work anymore, because you're shoving carbohydrates in, you restricted, you're still gaining weight, you're probably insulin resistant. So the key, what I learned, the brain needs 600 calories a day. And I had to get it where it wasn't used to this glucose. I had to get access to the freezer full of food, in other words, fat. So I had to lower my insulin levels. And to do that, as I said earlier, carbohydrates are the gatekeeper to getting into the freezer. So I had to lower my carbohydrate intake. I read a lot about ketogenic diets, and I went through this 14-day fat adaptation period where I only consumed 20 net grams net of fiber. So if you have like an avocado, maybe it's actually 74% of the carbohydrate is not counted toward the 20 because there's a lot of dietary fiber. So it's 20 net of fiber grams of carbohydrate a day, enough protein. Enough protein is anywhere from 0.7 to 0.9 times your lean body mass. If you stay within protein of grams, that much, and then you make up the difference in fat, because fat does not spike insulin. Fat, 1 gram of fat, 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So fat is just this awesome stuff. I had blood work done before and after. My saturated fat levels dropped. It's shoving all this fat in my body. I lost 26 pounds going ketogenic. What happens with ketogenic is my glycogen levels went away. And now I got into the freezer fat. And that's where I burn all that. I burn all that off. My liver produces ketones. So the brain now, I'm fed about 80% of the 600 calories a day now is fed ketones, and it's happy. So it turns my hunger off. I am just never hungry. In fact, yesterday I went to see my doc on a regular visit, my wellness doc. And as he did a bunch of muscle testing, he said, you need to eat more. And I just went through our company's celebration. I was fasting 12 hours a day, and I wasn't getting enough in. I felt that way. So, today I'm up to about 2,300 calories, and it's just 1 o'clock. And so that's what ketogenic does. And after that 14-day period, you start adding back carbohydrates. I can consume about 50, 60 a day. Days I work out, I can do a little bit more and stay in ketosis, where I've got ketones and I'm burning fat, where I'm constantly into the freezer, as I said. Okay, so Diana had to leave. Rachel, what do you think of carb cycling? Always tricking the body. Okay, I'm not sure, Rachel, what carb cycling really is. I think you're saying that maybe you go up carbs, down carbs one day where you're shocking the body. I'm just going to go to the fundamental. Okay, if you are eating the right kind of carbs, like dietary fiber carbs, green leafy carbs, great. Okay, those kind of carbs don't do much with insulin. But if you're insulin resistant like I was, Okay, all carbs I treated them the same because I always put good low glycemic index carbs in my body, and I still gained weight. So to get my body keto adapted, fat adapted, you have to go through a 14-day period. There's no ifs, ands, and buts. There's no way around it. The Atkins diet, which was kind of a low carb, failed a lot of people because they ate too much protein. When I did Atkins years ago, even before I joined Isogenics, our company, Atkins failed me. Why? Because they ate too much protein. And the excess amino acids that are in the protein that can't be absorbed turn into glucose. So my insulin levels stayed spiked, and I felt like crap. And so to get your body what we call fat adapted, you have to go through a period of time of carbohydrate restriction, 20 net grams of carbs per day for at least 14 days. And it was like different. I mean, when I first, the day before I started, I looked in my refrigerator. All I saw was carbohydrates. Looked in my pantry. All I saw was carbohydrate. Everything that I ever ate, carbohydrates. As an endurance athlete, you need to get 65% of your calories in carbohydrates, Mike, and you need to limit your fat to like 15%. Like earlier today, this is my actually matcha green tea and MCT oil by it's called Brain Octane. This is seriously good stuff. And so for me personally, I had to count calories. And during the 14-day period, 5 of them, I was down in Arizona living in a hotel room, counting calories, count my macros, fat, carbs, and protein. And twice in that 5 days, I ate too many chicken wings at dinner the night before, and it threw me out of ketosis. And I'm working with a lot of people now in this private group that I have, and they're having great success with ketogenic. Now, here's the other thing, too. I should have printed out this graph. So, bottom line, if you want a diet that's predictable, okay, regardless of your insulin resistant or sensitivity, low carbohydrate will deliver that to you. It works every time. It will cure type 2 diabetes. And that's not me saying that. It's Dr. Jason Fung and others. There is some serious science of intermittent fasting. See, when you fast, there's no calories going in the refrigerator, glycogen. And as you fast and you're moving and you're pulling out that glycogen, and your brain eventually, when the refrigerator is empty, is going to move your body into ketosis. It's going to say, I need fuel. So your liver starts producing ketones, brain gets happy, and you start burning fat. And that will work whether you're insulin sensitive or insulin resistant. There are some seriously great athletes that are moving to a ketogenic diet. Endurance athletes especially. Chris Froome, I think that's how you pronounce it, it's from the UK, just won his 4th Tour de France. That's like one of the toughest endurance races in the world. He's 4-time winner, and he's a ketogenic athlete. Tom Brady of the world champion New England Patriots went ketogenic a few years ago. LeBron James, everyone's heard of him. LeBron gained a lot of weight, and so he's went on a low carbohydrate diet. Zach Bitter set the American record for running the most miles in 12 hours. Plus, he's got the fastest 100-mile race around just a 400-meter track. He just went round and round and round and round. Zach Bitter is a ketogenic athlete. I actually had the occasion to talk to Zach. And then, if you're insulin resistant, a ketogenic diet will absolutely give you predictable results. Whereas, as I said before, carbohydrates are the gatekeeper to fat burning, because carbohydrates create glucose. Glucose stores in your blood determine if your insulin is high or low. If your insulin is high, fat burning is turned off. because the body got to use up all that glucose or you can have some serious problems. So you lower insulin, and then you get in this state of ketosis and you start burning fat. And that's generally what most people want out of a diet. I've gone here 23 minutes. Any other questions that any of you have? I see Helen's on the line. Helen's just one of my brand new cleansers, went through her first intermittent fast for 2 full days. She rocked. She's going up to college here later, and she's trying to figure this game out too, and I appreciate her. I see Michelle's online. She is, I think, a registered nurse, and I met Michelle. We were at a Heather Golnick triathlon camp in Florida many years ago. Any other questions out of any of you? I appreciate all of you online. If you go to my blog, livefreeanddreambig.com, and you just scroll down a little bit and subscribe. Soon, I am so close to releasing a 23-page ketogenic guide that discusses what I just shared with you. It also has some resources, like one is a blood ketone glucose meter. I prick my finger, put the test strip so I know exactly my state. I got it dialed in. You don't really have to do some of these things. I tell you the foods that are generally you need to eat. If you go to that blog, within, gosh, I hope less than a week, I'll release this guide. You'll actually resubscribe to the blog guide so I can send you more information just about keto. That's my way of trying to give back, because there again, before April 1st, actually it was about March, I really started to learn this. And I finally had my light go on and go, why isn't everybody asking that question? Are you insulin sensitive or insulin resistant? Because if you're insulin resistant and you're older or even younger, I mean, type 2 diabetes is rampant in children now. Why? Because they're feeding all that high sugar, high spike insulin stuff. Obesity rates, 37% of Americans are obese, 70-something% are overweight. With you just look at the number of type 2 diabetics in the country, and when you link that together with the obesity numbers, that's where I come up with my at least 1/2 of every adult in America is insulin resistant. And the way around that's a low carbohydrate diet. And I wish there was another way. I miss carbs sometimes, but I've learned how to get sweet in me without any carbohydrate grams. And seriously, I've never felt better in my life. Almost everybody that I've talked to that went ketogenic, some long term. I had a chat with a gentleman that's been ketogenic for 20 years, 2 decades. I mean, he got it figured out a long time ago. He looks ripped. He looks good. He's not an athlete, high energy. And that's how I felt. I've slept better. My brain being fed ketones. My cognition is up. At night, I dream and remember them. I used to I guess everybody dreams, but I never remember them. Now I remember them. I go to sleep way easier. I don't ache as much, especially training. I'm training harder than I've ever trained before. And I just recover so much better because I'm mostly burning fat, and fat uses less oxygen, so there's less free radicals, less inflammation in the body. So ketogenic's the real deal. All right, I don't see any more questions. I've probably taken way too much of your time. I appreciate all of you. I don't know if I'll always do these on Saturday. I'm probably pick a day in the middle of the week, later in the evening. I think that fits most people. But I appreciate each of you online. You guys take care. See ya. Bye.